Everyone, Matthew DeSantis here with NYRA Bets, here with a preview of this weekend's Jockey Club Oaks Invitational, which is taking place at Belmont at the Big A. We are back in the city, back at Aqueduct after a summer up north, and this is our big feature race on Saturday, which is part of a late pick five sequence that I got to tell you about. 59 betting options in that late pick five. And that's just those in the main field. Really big field sizes for the five races in that late pick five sequence are on the turf. A lot of great betting interest there. Definitely want to make sure to play that late pick five on opening Saturday of the Belmont Fall Meet at Aqueduct. And listen, when we talk about Belmont at the Big A and we get back to the city, we got to get back to my bread and butter and my favorite guest, and perhaps my favorite person in all of NYRA, which Sara Elbadwi. Sara, thank you so much for coming on and talking to me about this race. And before we get to the race, you and I spent the whole summer in Saratoga, and I told somebody that being in Saratoga the whole summer is like eating your favorite food for 2 straight months, and it's great. But at some point, you just want to get back to the city. And I don't know about you, but I'm really happy to get back to Aqueduct.
Yeah, someone that I was chatting with earlier today described it as the perennial Groundhog Day when we're in Saratoga, because you just wake up, you go to work, you come home, and in my case, go to sleep, and in yours, record more content. So nice to be back. It's still here, so good news there that it's still standing in place and really nice out. It seems like it's going to be for this weekend coming up, and it's just enough time off to be excited to come right back and see some of this action coming up this weekend, including that graded stakes you mentioned.
Absolutely. And, one of the things that I think Aqueduct doesn't get enough credit for is what a great turf course it has. Really, it's a really good turf course. And we see some really good horses, obviously, this weekend in that Jockey Club Oaks Invitational. Grade 3 going a mile and 3/8 for 3-year-old fillies. This is an intriguing field because you have a couple of horses coming over from Europe, and those are your two favorites in terms of Lady Mary and Beautiful Love, who does have a start in North America previously, but was prior to that running overseas. And then you look at some of the American horses like Mixologist and Makanga and a couple of others that I think are a little bit interesting that we can talk about. But this is an interesting race that I don't know if it's defined by pace, but Makanga certainly, I know where that horse is going to be, and that's going to be up front.
And I think it's worth mentioning too, which I completely agree with that. She is a major player in this race in terms of a pace standpoint, but she is also cross-entered in the opening day Winter Memories going a mile. Regular rider John Velasquez is listed to be aboard from the one post in that race, whereas Lane Luzzy would be getting on, at least according to the entries coming up in this graded stakes effort. I don't know where they're going to run, but she's going to have an impact on how both of those races might play out. And I think that this one might be a little bit better suited for her running style. I just kind of wonder if she wants to go quite this far overall.
That's a great point about the distance. And we should mention John Velasquez on Saturday will be riding up at Woodbine. So that's why you would see the jockey change to Lane Luzzy if Makanga were to run on Saturday. But if Makanga's not in this race, there's no pace at all. I mean, there's certainly not a horse that really stands out. And you know what that means. When there's a paceless turf race in New York, we're going 52 seconds to the half. I mean, it's not going to be a blistering pace. But in those instances, sometimes it's the jockey who's aggressive, who just takes the initiative, who can sometimes steal these things on the front end.
Absolutely. And I think that the horse that is likely to inherit that role as pace setter is probably the number 6 Mont Saint Michel, a horse that's still very lightly raced, going out for the Walsh Barn. Where does this one stand in terms of quality? I think that's a question that you can ask of this field overall. And so I wouldn't totally eliminate this one from the equation in terms of getting a piece of things, but the pace really does depend in my mind on where Makanga does run. And a horse that was able to close into a slow pace that certainly has the pedigree to be one of the graded stakes players going forwards. I have to both Princess Grace, earner of 1.8 million plus, as well as Catnip, who's grade 1 placed, and that's Mixologist, who really closed into a slow pace last time out to get the win via disqualification over Vino Rouge, which you can take a look at if you have it queued up. But with her, I kind of wonder, the pace was so slow, but it did come apart. She seemed to really be with the flow of the race. Did you think the same thing?
Yeah, I did. It was interesting because they, as you can see on the replay, they went 1:15 and 4 to the 6 furlong mark. So to your point, a rather slow pace, and yet flying. And you're right, did seem like she certainly pulled away. She was interfered with by the 4 coming down the lane, and was then put up as the winner. It certainly showed a pretty strong turn of foot, and the ability to close behind a slow pace is something that I always usually give a little bit of a check and or a plus to when I see a horse be able to do that, especially going so wide as she was forced to that day as well. So, it certainly did seem like the horses coming from off the pace were at an advantage, and that might just speak to the overall quality of the horses that were up front that day. But at 9-2, an interesting alternative to the 2 European runners who are likely to attract probably the most betting interest in this race.
And I think touching on one of those, beautiful love for Charlie Appleby, we know these horses take money for connections like this. I don't know about you, but I was a little disappointed in her effort in Saratoga. And I also wonder about distance with her because she's had more of her success going a little bit shorter, especially running well, going 7 furlongs. And I just wonder if the class of this race and where she might be slightly above it, I just don't know if the distance is going to catch up with her. And her last run disappointed me a little bit, but if she runs something like that race where she was running behind Cinderella's Dream and running against types like that in Maidan, I think that form could be very dangerous in a spot like this.
Yeah, certainly. We can take a look at the replay of that race 2 back that went in Maidan, where you're going to see William Buick in the blue silks riding this one, and again, a very strong turn of foot acceleration, able to really pull away from the rest of this field. And you can see some of the horses are making up ground, but by and large, nobody else is really making this dynamic of a move in this race, and the front runners are not fading all that much, but just able to pull away and win easily that day in a very impressive effort. And so we'll see. I was never that bullish on her in that first start in North America. She just didn't quite fit the profile of an Appleby horse that we tend to see come over. In other words, she wasn't really group staged, tested, and had a couple of wins. Obviously, like I said, one in Maidan, one in Newmarket, but wasn't kind of a top tier Appleby runner, in my opinion. Dylan Davis now up on the mount, and obviously Dylan looking to continue to capitalize off a really hot summer up at Saratoga where he was riding so well, and interesting to see. But that one again is going to attract a lot of money because of the connections. I don't know. I kind of prefer the German horse, Lady Mary, a little bit more. And by the way, how great is this? We have Lady Mary right next to Lady Madonna in this race. So kind of funny to see those two drawing right next to each other. But Lady Mary is a first-time North American starter who I think certainly you have to take pretty seriously in this spot for Jack Sisterson.
And I think the price on this one would likely be quite a bit shorter if this was your typical Godolphin, Charlie Appleby foreign shipper coming in. But because we have those different connections and Jack Sisterson, he has plenty of success, but he's not quite at the same level of notoriety as someone like Charlie Appleby with bringing over those foreign runners. This one you might end up getting a somewhat fair price on the horse that I believe is the likeliest winner of this race, because as far as who she's been facing overseas and where she's been fitting in terms of consistency, you know that she can also get the distance, as she's run well at 1.25 miles. And I think we have some distance questions about some of the other players in this race. And when you look at Jack Sisterson, when he brings horses over, foreign shippers on the turf, he has very good numbers doing so from a limited sample size. He's 3 for 9 over the past 5 years with a positive ROI. He is 0 for 2 in graded stakes, but some of them have had success in listed stakes races. And so I think that when they're well intentioned and spotted in races where they're likely to be successful against fields that make sense from a competition standpoint, they have to be considered. And at least it's a move that he's done well in terms of being able to bring these horses over and get them acclimated to running here in the US. So she makes a lot of sense to me. And I think that you might get a fairer price given connections.
Yeah, no, I agree with you about the connection point. I think that's a really good one to point out. Manny Franco hops aboard this one for the mount. And, if you look at the past performances, only 1 for 8 winning, but 7 for 8 in the money, and has been facing group stage competition in 4 of those 8 career starts. and has only finished off the boards once in the German 1000 Guineas, which is a great Group 2 over there. And just to show you, she ran up against, this is a race from a couple of races back, I believe 3 back, and this was one of the Diana prep races over in Germany at Hofgarten. And it was, she's kind of on the inside here, making a little bit of a move, going up against her big rival, which is Early. And Early ultimately gets the win, but then comes back to win a Group 1 later. A very, very talented horse. So you can see kind of stride for stride, neck for neck. And the camera angle makes me think that this was maybe at Kentucky Downs because we don't really get a head-on of the finish line. But nevertheless, it was an impressive effort for, like you said, connections that might not get the most attention. And I don't want to compare her to this horse, but I do think it's interesting that I felt like a horse like Rebel's Romance, I believe it was Rebel's Romance, ran a lot in Germany. And I think people sometimes discounted that a little bit of going, well, it's not Europe, it's not England, it's not Ireland, it's not France.
It's not what we think of as Europe.
Yes, exactly. It's not. Yeah, I need to take geography lessons, but it was. And so sometimes I feel like horses coming out of Germany get kind of downgraded a little bit. I remember sometimes even horses coming out of running in Italy when they came over. I remember Shug McGahee had a horse who came over from Italy as well, who was pretty good. But it was interesting to see that, and I just wonder if that's also part of it. Is you look at the racing form and you go, Dusseldorf, Hofengarten, these are not Newmarket, Curra, Ascot, where people are familiar with those names, Chantilly, Longchamp, etc. So, going to be interesting to see. And you're right, no distance questions with Lady Mary at all. Now, is that your kind of top choice, you think, in this race? I mean, as the most likely winner, are you going to try to beat the potential favorite? Although it will be interesting to see how this race is bet.
I'm curious to see where those cross-entered horses do end up going, and I'm going to reserve my final selection for when we know where they'll be running, because I think that there's a major impact on the way that the race is going to be run in general. But I do think she's the likeliest winner, regardless of where those two end up deciding to run their race. And she just is one that makes a lot of sense to me, because when you look at who else has some sort of credentials or some sort of good races in general and level of consistency, well, it's horses I have distance questions about, and horses that are going to be some of those shorter prices. So unless someone has an idea with a long shot that is really stepping up in class, that isn't one that's really been totally exposed, I think that maybe she just ends up being the best horse in this race.
Yeah, absolutely. It will be interesting to see where Makonga ends up running. I do think if she ends up going to the Winter Memories on Friday, I really like Mont Saint Michel in this spot. And I don't think you'll get 8-1, because I think everybody else will see what we kind of talked about, which is this is the horse that will likely inherit the lead. And what I really like about this horse, A, it's a Brendan Walsh horse, and I'm a sucker for that on the turf. And then B, Kendrick Carmouche is aboard. Now, we don't think about Kendrick riding on the turf very much, but one thing I know about Kendrick, he's aggressive. And if Makonga's not in this race, he's going. And he's going to send this horse straight to the front. And, this horse has some nice races, ran off of Lasix the last 2 times, and have seen steadily improving buyer speed figures. You know me well enough to know that I like lightly raced horses with improving speed figures. And this one certainly fits that bill. Has been running at 1 1/8 miles, certainly would have to get the distance, and that is a little bit of a question. But if she's able to set things her own way up front, it might be just an interesting play. And again, if the European runners attract a little bit of money, maybe you can still get 5-1, 6-1 on this type of a horse, even with the scratch of Makonga. We'll have to see, but going to be a really fun race. And now you, if I'm not mistaken, are going to be on Talking Horses on Saturday, and then people are going to see you on no longer Saratoga Live, America's Day at the Races on Saturday as well.
Yeah, how many times can we accidentally call it Saratoga Live? But yes, Saturday, busy day, lots of good racing coming up. And we're also providing some coverage from Monmouth and Woodbine as well, since there's plenty of fun action coming up at both of those places. So I know everybody's in that little bit of a Saratoga hangover, but we still have a lot of good racing coming up, and it's not just Belmont at the Big A on Saturday.
No, absolutely. I mean, the The fields at Woodbine are also spectacular. I have a video I just posted on NYRA Bets YouTube with Jeff Bratt, who's the analyst up there, previewing the 4 Grade 1 races up at Woodbine. And let me tell you something. I know the Woodbine Mile is the headliner, but the EP Taylor is a fantastic race with Moira, Fev Rover, Blue Rose Sen, and Cinderella's Dream, who you mentioned earlier, a 3-year-old Charlie Appleby filly who's super impressive. And so going to be a lot of fun to see the racing, not just here in the city, but also at Monmouth, up in Toronto at Woodbine as well. Sara, as always, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing you at the track, and I'm glad the track is still standing, so I know where I can go to from my office. Yeah, lovely. Well, listen, folks, thanks so much for watching this preview of the Jockey Club Oaks Invitational. Make sure to press that like button and subscribe to the NYRA Bets YouTube channel to get all of our race previews, full card analyses, handicapping and betting tutorials, and so much more. For Sara Elbadwi, my name is Matthew DeSantis, wishing you a great and prosperous day at the races, and reminding you, friends, it's now post time.